Greenwood Cemetery in Decatur, Illinois is one of the most haunted places on Earth. Its dark and sordid history has helped make it one of the most infamous burial sites on the planet. But what did this humble boneyard do to earn such a spooky reputation? Today, we're talking about the haunted history of Greenwood Cemetery. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below which true-life ghost stories you would like to hear about next. Okay, time to do the mash, the Weird History Mash. It's a graveyard smash. What is now Greenwood Cemetery in Decatur, Illinois, was first used as sacred burial grounds by Native Americans hundreds of years before any Europeans lived there. The first European settlers erected a log cabin in the area in 1820. As the next few years passed, more frontiersmen continued to arrive from the east, adding to the region's new hardscrabble population. Life was hard and unpredictable. Anything from weather to illnesses could quickly wipe out an entire family. Due to necessity, this meant there wasn't much to the burial customs for these frontier people. After a few brief prayers and Bible passages, the deceased would be placed in a simple hole in the ground, often wrapped only in a winding sheet and left to the earth. As the years went on and the mortality rates increased, many of the settlers began searching for a communal place to bury their dead. Look, when money is tight, you need to do things as efficiently as possible, and that includes burying people. This need led them to burying their deceased in places that the Native Americans had also used, on the site which would eventually become Greenwood Cemetery. And while the settlers and Native Americans shared the area for a brief time, the settlers ultimately drove the tribe away from the area with an act of cold-blooded violence. Dubbed by historian Roy V. Ternius as the Moonshiners and the Indians, the incident is thought to have occurred in the late 1820s, possibly 1828, according to records. Regardless of the exact year, in the spring of the year in question, a small group of moonshiners chased some Native American people who were passing by their still. The reason for the pursuit and subsequent attack is unknown, but we do know that the Native Americans were chased through the woods and forced up a hill in the direction of the burial grounds. Once they were cornered, the moonshiners gunned them down and concealed their bodies in a shallow ravine on the side of the hill, which they covered with stones. The resulting crude grave can still be seen on the southwestern part of the cemetery. Wonder why everyone thinks that place is haunted. Settlers continued to use the area as a corpse garden, and by 1857 it was incorporated as Greenwood Cemetery. After it fell into extreme disrepair in the 1920s following the Great Depression, eerie ghost stories began to circulate about its restless residents. But the spooky tales weren't enough to dissuade some people. By the 1950s, Greenwood had become something of a secret hideout for criminals. There were reports of gangs using the cemetery as a meetup spot at night to avoid the police. There were even rumors of cults using the grounds for various black magic rituals, which was probably nonsense, but hey, I'm not going out there to prove them wrong. But any of these stories of the living playing with the occult forces is nothing compared to the vast collection of undead apparitions said to have made Greenwood their eternal home. One of these legends of otherworldly encounters is the Weeping Woman of the Barackman Steppes, one of Greenwood's most frequently spotted residents. Greenwood Cemetery is a rolling mix of hills and valleys, and on one of these hills are 5 stone steps which lead up to the 4 gravestones of the Barackman family. Throughout the years, there have been numerous reports of a woman standing at the top of the steps with her head bowed, crying like she just got a look at her monthly cable bill. This broken-hearted specter only appears in the evening and is said to vanish with the sunset. But while this weeping woman has made a good amount of appearances, her legend pales in comparison to Greenwood's most famous and tragic spirit. In 1930, a young couple was engaged to be married, but the young groom-to-be was a bit too wild for the family of his future bride. It seems that during these waning years of prohibition, this young man made his money selling illegal whiskey, which, while not being a terribly uncommon profession at the time, could still be very dangerous, and probably wasn't great son-in-law material. You don't want your daughter to marry a man who might suddenly get shot, arrested, or blown up while bringing home the bacon. One summer night, the couple planned to meet up and finally run away together to elope. The plan was for the two to leave just after midnight, after the young man delivered a final shipment of whiskey to supply them with the money they needed for their secret wedding trip. He never showed up, but he hadn't gotten cold feet. He'd been gunned down by a rival bootlegger while delivering his whiskey, and the culprit had dumped his body into the Sangamon River. Well, I guess so technically he did get cold feet. After waiting for him all night, the young would-be bride learned of her fiancé's fate when his body was discovered by local fishermen. He was buried at Greenwood Cemetery, which you probably saw coming. But what you may not have seen coming is that the young woman, unable to face life without her beloved, plunged into the river and drowned. Hey, look, it's a ghost story. It's gonna be sad. Nobody turns into a poltergeist after living an awesome life and passing away peacefully in a gigantic bed. The woman's parents decided to bury her in her wedding gown. Soon after, stories began circulating about a young woman in a white wedding dress walking through the cemetery, weeping and looking through the headstones, presumably searching for her lost love. It's been 100 years, you'd think she'd have found it by now. Maybe they're moving the headstones to prank the ghosts. That's a reality show. Ghost prankers. Hey there, weird historians! Today's episode is sponsored by Wondrium. If you want to learn even more surprising facts about our world, Wondrium has got you covered. Wondrium is the premier educational video subscription service, providing comprehensive, illuminating, and entertaining content to flex your brain muscles. The folks behind the Great Courses Plus have created even better educational experiences with Wondrium, where you can find all of the classic Great Courses Plus content, plus a whole lot more. Wondrium's carefully curated collection of short and long-form videos, tutorials, travelogues, documentaries, and more is thoroughly researched and presented by engaging experts. For example, you might be interested in pirates because you like wearing an eye patch. Thanks to Wondrium's course, The Real History of Pirates, you can learn that pirates didn't say "arr" until the Disney movie Treasure Island. The best part is, Wondrium's library is constantly growing, adding new content every month. You can even download the podcast version of any course and listen to it on the go. Wondrium is giving Weird History viewers a free trial. Head over to wondrium.com/weirdhistory to get started, or click on the link at the description below. Your brain is going to love this place. Thanks to Wondrium, today's sponsor. While the Greenwood Bride is one of the most well-known of the cemetery ghost stories, she is far from the strangest. One of the weirdest legends of Greenwood revolves around its devil's chair. The chair in question is actually what's known as a mourning chair, a bit of furniture placed by graves so that family and friends will have a place to sit while they visit their loved ones. But according to some superstitions, when someone sits on one of these chairs, they will be cursed with bad luck, or even die within a year. But there are others who say that sitting in a mourning chair is actually good luck, or might even promise riches for those who take a rest in them. Superstitions are nothing if not inconsistent. What if you just made your headstone a chair? But the ones revolving around the Devil's Chair in Greenwood Cemetery are a little different than the average mourning chair folklore. These stories say that if you sit on the chair in Greenwood at a certain time of night, you can make a pact with the devil himself. This pact will enable you to get anything you want for 7 years. Then, as is customary for any Faustian transaction, the devil will promptly return to collect your soul as payment at the end of the 7 years. If a deal with the devil only lasts for 7 years, how did 2.5 Men stay on for 12? Charlie Sheen, that guy can negotiate. Interestingly, while many cemeteries have removed their mourning chairs because of vandalism, Greenwood's chairs remain. But what doesn't remain is the Greenwood Public Mausoleum, which was built in 1908 and demolished in 1967. According to reports, the construction was shoddy, causing the mausoleum to leak. By the 1940s, the mausoleum had slipped into complete disrepair. Soon afterwards, unexplained reports of strange voices coming from the building began to spread. People swore they could hear crying and even screaming. By 1957, the mausoleum was declared to be unsafe and was closed. Families were notified and asked to relocate their loved ones. But even so, over 100 bodies were never claimed. Some were never even identified. The cemetery buried these remains in several common graves after the mausoleum was demolished, which was a good move, definitely not a recipe for creating more ghosts. The site of the former mausoleum is still vacant today, nearly 5 decades later. The common graves of the mausoleum's unidentified former residents are across the road, where voices and screams continue to be reported, along with eerie phantom lights seen moving at night. But even these unnatural lights can't hold a candle to the most haunted area of Greenwood Cemetery. During the Civil War, troop trains on their way to Confederate prison camps near Chicago would stop in Decatur. One such train stopped to unload most of its cargo, the deceased bodies of Southern prisoners who had succumbed to yellow fever on the way north. The expired Confederate soldiers were loaded into a massive unmarked grave, although rumors persist to this day that some of them weren't all the way dead yet. After the war, a memorial to honor the Union troops of Illinois was built on top of the site. Okay, cemetery should make you take a class about not pissing off the dead. It's like they're doing it on purpose. Several years later, the nearby Sangamon River flooded, washing away many of the Confederate remains. After the flood, stories began to circulate of ghost soldiers wandering the cemetery and chilling the blood with their anguished cries. People also claim to see phantom lights flickering rapidly through the graves. Local legends insist that these are the spirits of the Confederate soldiers searching for their earthly remains. One popular account said to have occurred within the last 10 years begins with a young boy walking along the road in the back corner of the cemetery. The boy claims to have seen a man standing on top of the hill who waved over to him. The boy approached him only to see that he was wearing tattered gray clothes covered with dark spots that appeared to be blood. The man seemed to be confused and asked the boy for help, claiming that he didn't know where he was and that he just wanted to get home. But before the boy could answer, the man vanished right before his eyes. Did the story really happen? And if it did, was the man the boy saw a ghost? Or just some guy who got hammered on the devil's chair the night before and couldn't find his phone to call an Uber? Even if it's unnerving or downright frightening, the thought of ghosts returning to visit the living provides a strange comfort because it serves as proof of the afterlife. But why do ghosts only seem to show up in graveyards or other creepy spots? Does that mean there is an afterlife, but you're stuck within the confines of a creaky mansion or behind the gates of a cemetery for eternity? That's enough spooky talk for now. Time to curl up with a sack full of candy and a peanut special. Wonder if the devil's chair reclines. So what do you think? Is Greenwood Cemetery really haunted? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.